You guys know that I have an interest in immigration without assimilation, mass immigration, and multiculturalism. So I feel compelled to talk about what happened with Tucker Carlson and the ADL this week.
And they're being treated better than American citizens. Now, I know that the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. But they become hysterical because that's what's happening, actually. Let's just say it, that's true.
When you import millions of people of different cultures into your nation, you dilute the vote of the native population. Now, you can argue what is the native population of the United States, and you hear a lot of leftist talking points. But I can understand the concerns of working class Americans given the millions of people that are coming in vote entirely different than them and have entirely different priorities. So the working class of the United States is getting disenfranchised. And that is where the power of the Democratic Party lies. In mass immigration. They would be a dying party if it wasn't for mass immigration. The Democratic Party is no longer trying to capture the vote of the average American citizen. They don't need to. All they need to do is promise things to the people that are coming in, to the poor scale migrants that are coming in. Tucker Carlson touched on this and he talked about replacement.
This matters on a bunch of different levels, but on the most basic level, it's a voting rights question. In a democracy, one person equals one vote. If you change the population, you dilute the political power of the people who live there. So every time they import a new voter, I become disenfranchised as a current voter.
So how dare Tucker talk about replacement? Doesn't he know that it's a white supremacist conspiracy theory?
That when we get to 2042 or 2045, whatever year you want to use, that we actually will not be suffering from what other countries like South Africa have, which is having the numbers but not having the power. We want, people say demographics are not destiny. Well, we're trying to make it destiny. So that's the work that we're doing.
Except, of course, when the left talks about it. Tucker touched on a sensitive topic. And the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, immediately called for him to be fired, saying that he was spreading anti-Semitic propaganda. Now, why is that anti-Semitic ADL or Jonathan Greenblatt? Why is a Jewish organization freaking out over this? The ADL has no issue saying the same thing that Tucker said about Israel and protecting the population of Israel, as Tucker talked about on his program.
Go to the Anti-Defamation League's website sometime if you'd like a glimpse of what an unvarnished conversation about a country's national interest might look like. In a short essay posted to the site, the ADL explains why the state of Israel should not allow more Arabs to become citizens with voting rights. Quote, with historically high birth rates among the Palestinians and a possible influx of Palestinian refugees and their descendants now living around the world, the ADL explains, Jews would quickly become a minority within a binational state, thus likely ending any semblance of equal representation and protections. In this situation, the Jewish population would be increasingly politically and potentially physically vulnerable. It is unrealistic and unacceptable, the ADL continues, to expect the state of Israel to voluntarily subvert its own sovereign existence and nationalist identity and become a vulnerable minority within what was once its own territory. End quote.
It's totally reasonable. That should be the case for every sovereign nation. It is 100% a betrayal when politicians of a country knowingly dilute the vote of its own population. Now, this isn't only happening in the US. It's currently happening all over Europe as well. Europeans are currently having hundreds of thousands of migrants pouring into their countries. A change of demographics that they did not vote for, and in fact are mostly against. Now, here we go back to the question. Why does Jonathan Greenblatt say that talking about replacement migration is anti-Semitic? The UN has talked about replacement migration as well. I know I have some Jewish followers and followers of all religions and backgrounds, but ask yourself, why are people not allowed to talk about this? The replacement migration is going on all across the West. And you can be sure when it's done with the West, it'll happen in all nations across the world, to the point that we become just a mix of people that are completely rootless. Multiple US sources have admitted replacement migration. The UN has admitted it. Many analysts have said that many Europeans will become a minority in their ancestral homes, if of course the trend isn't reversed. I don't know about you, but this strikes me as very wrong. And there are groups that are actively promoting this. This is not happening organically. Those same groups that are actively promoting the multiculturalization of Europe and the rest of the West will pretend to be very caring about the native populations of other parts of the world and preserving those populations. For now, of course. For example, one of these groups is the European Institute of Jewish Studies. The institute is at the forefront of the movement of multiculturalizing Europe. Its founder, Barbara Spector, said in an interview that Europe has yet not learned how to be multicultural.
At this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century.
Now, why must it take place, Barbara?
It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode.
In essence, she's admitting that Europeans are not doing well with multiculturalization, and it's not really working for them. It's not working for the native populations of Europe, but that they need to learn how to do it because they need to be transformed. Why, Barbara? Why do they need to be transformed?
And without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
I personally think Europe would have been fine without being culturally enriched. We have seen the results of this forced diversity. And in fact, I'll add a caveat. Europe, as it stands, is perfectly diverse. Italy, Germany, Spain, Sweden, they all have their distinct cultures, but they function within their own nation. The question is, though, why are these groups pushing this? Why is there a double standard when it comes to multiculturalizing the West, but nowhere else? You can't say that it's happening, but it is. It's not a crazy conspiracy theory. And the fact that we cannot talk about it, as the ADL demonstrated with their backlash, is very problematic in my opinion. And that's exactly why we should be talking about it. Many people are aware of this phenomenon of globalizing the world, globalism, and I'm not talking about the exchange of ideas, the economic exchange, traveling, visiting other nations and staying for a while. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about one world government, a new world order, where every nation is governed by the same rules. What happens when there's millions of people that are completely rootless? They have no deep sense of belonging to a place. It is way easier to rule over those people. It is way easier to impose a foreign government over those people because they have no sense of identity that is tied to their nation. Which is why moving millions of people across nations and making them feel like pieces on a chessboard works wonderfully for anyone that wants to institute a one world government. It is that you're from Italy or from Nigeria or from Sweden or from France. I want you to feel a sense of pride of your nation that goes beyond I like the food and I like the architecture and the economic opportunities, but a deeper sense of belonging. And that is hard to accomplish when people are constantly being moved like pieces on a chessboard across the nations of the world. And it's a shame that they're trying to make us a bunch of rootless people, wandering the land with no sense of belonging.